Welcome, workers and friends. Welcome back to Anti-imperialist America. I'm your host, Dust James, the Marxist-Leninist truck driver. I'm coming to you live from my humble home in rural North Carolina. It's a beautiful May Day morning. Sun is shining in my face. I'm looking into the sun through some blinds. About ready to start today. I've been putting off this live. I've been advertising that I would do a live called All Scientific Socialism is Patriotic. I have quite the journey on this subject. Drinking some Mountain Dew, some caffeine, and some sugar, like the good Southern American that I have become. I'm ready to just talk with y'all. So I got to put this plug in there before I get into today's subject. Please like this video. Please share this video. Share it on the Twitter. Share it on the Facebook. I'm banned from Facebook for exposing the NATO Nazis in Russia. Not in Russia, my bad. It's an early morning. The NATO Nazis in the Ukraine that have been mass murdering ethnic Russians, that the Russians are now defending against. There's a complete media shutdown on this issue. Even if you share images of the Azov battalion who have been terrorizing people, they're outright Nazis, form of the government. If you show them with a NATO with the NATO symbols next to the swastika, it is banned on Facebook, and they take your account down. Acting like as if you're the one promoting far right ideas when you're the one exposing the far right wing militias that the U.S. is sending billions and billions of dollars to. So please subscribe. Please share this out. Make this a bigger conversation. Get involved. Message me on Twitter at DustJames90. That seems to be my main social media since I also have an email, workingclassrevolt, but at gmail.com, but I don't check that as much. I think probably the best way to get in contact with me, for me to respond quickly, is if you have access to my Facebook, send me a Facebook Messenger or send me a direct message on Twitter. And again, that is DustJames90. And this is a resource for people as Working Class Revolt, as a larger coalition. I want you to come on. I want you to develop your skills to go live. I want you to come on and, develop public speaking skills in this new streaming format. It's important. I want as many people as possible putting out a good message. And Working Class Revolt is a vehicle and a tool that I do in my spare time. I work close to 60-hour weeks. And it's May Day as well. And that's a beautiful thing for me. I think I'm just going to get right into my story. First of all, I want to give a shout out to the party chairman saying, "Hey, Dust," and digging the Russian flag. Yeah, I really support. I support about anybody standing up against imperialism led by the U.S. Anything that weakens imperialism led by the U.S. gives opportunity for socialist countries and oppressed countries to rise up and develop themselves and move closer towards socialism. The main force in the world today holding back socialism is imperialism led by the U.S. Monopoly capitalism. It's not even the U.S. people or the U.S. nation. It is a small group of monopoly capitalist oil banking cartels going back to the same 5 or 6 families. The Rockefellers, Rothschilds, etc., who own these major banking institutions like Chase Manhattan Bank, and Exxon Mobil, etc. These oil banking cartels control 80% of the world's oil, and are the ones who invest and make money off of the drug wars and drug cartels and the military industrial complex and et cetera. These are the pillars of the economy that control the global economy. It's this small handful of people that really benefits from the mass death, destruction, and chaos, which is the global system of imperialism. Imperialism led by U.S. imperialism. So I'll get into today's show. All scientific socialism is patriotic, and I've had a long journey on this. Maybe if I could just go back, if you're looking for, I'm a truck driver. I'm dyslexic. That's part of the reason why I prefer to read Stalin, Mao, William Z. Foster, Caleb Maupin, to reading Marx or Engels, is because I don't have a lot of time to study. I barely have time to do these shows. I barely have time to relax. But figures like leaders of the revolution, were also in similar circumstances. That's why Stalin, Foundations of Leninism, will give you, if you truly look at that book and invest like a third of what you do into your favorite hobby, like sports and stuff. If you apply yourself to understand Stalin's Foundations of Leninism, you will understand scientific socialism better than the majority of bourgeois academics, including their best, like Richard Wolff. Richard Wolff is a Western chauvinist. Richard Wolff thinks that European style co ops are the way forward, when anti imperialist countries, um, China, with planned economies, are leading the way forward. And he doesn't recognize that. And in the United States, we have different conditions, and maybe co ops will be a part of it. But ultimately, we need people power over the government to plan the economy. And if you read it, just a working class person like myself, dyslexic, can sit there and read Foundations of Leninism and know that even the most advanced academics are wrong on the issue of imperialism. Even the best ones. Probably one of the few academics I respect are Parenti, and Grover Furr are some of the few people, because academia is really, I mean, it's really highly controlled and manipulated by the ruling class. And just you as a working class person who has the right mindset, who's looking to improve conditions for your class, can understand scientific socials in the world better even the vast majority of academics. Because you are looking for the truth, and they're looking to defend the system. Or they're looking, at the very least, they're looking to keep their position. They're not looking to lose their position within the imperialist system. So I'm going to get into today's topic. I got a little bit on that. So let's take it back to 2006 or 7, and I was in the marching band in a military town, 30 miles from the largest military base, maybe in the world, in the country, Fort Bragg. A lot of people in Fort Bragg is where they're shipped in when they start their military training. And a lot of the economy is hooked in with the military. A lot of people, and they teach people in the military, the U.S. is the best place in the world, and people have fought and died to defend that. And that's a lie, and it's wrong. I mean, the U.S. by no standard is the best place in the world. I mean, they don't have the best. Well, you can get into Parenti's talk on the difference between super patriotism and a more critical revolutionary form of patriotism. And the jingoist form of patriotism is just incorrect. In reality, the government is controlled by the monopoly capitalists who are destroying American communities. And the military goes and they fight to put down other poor black and brown people to continue the same imperialist system that is harming the people here. But people believe that. And for whatever reason, I think maybe my dad had some peace ideas. Um, we're originally from upstate New York, came down here when I was 5 years old. I've been growing up in this community in central North Carolina. And my dad, had some different ideas about it. And I guess from him, I learned that the Pentagon, the military, and the government are not on the side of the people. I had that understanding. And I became close with, had a lot of friends in the immigrant community. Like I said, we were economic refugees, came to the South about the same time as people were coming up from Mexico. I made a lot of friends in the Mexican immigrant community. And I was absolutely appalled at the way our Mexican neighbors, coworkers, friends, loved ones were being treated. The racism in the South, racism hooked to the stratification of labor. I mean, this was after the fact. I mean, I could already start to see it in high school. But then I worked summer jobs and I noticed how, people without papers, people in undocumented status, and people who are just, brown in general were seen as less in the workplace to maintain a super exploitation of oppressed nations, super exploitation of Rasa, which really has never really been treated like a full part of this country, even though a third of the land of this country was stolen from Mexican people. And you're thinking, oh, well, a lot of people are going to watch this and they see the American flag and they're going to be like, oh, this is one of them brown, this is one of them red brown alliance motherfuckers are trying to bring nationalism into the socialist spaces. And I'm trying to tell you that it's absolutely fucking absurd. If you know anything about me or anything about my background and where I come from and what I've been trying to do for over the last decade. So yeah, I was in marching band, and I think it was my senior year, I think 2007 or so, in a military town. I decided that I cannot stand to play the Star Spangled Banner. I cannot stomach to play the Star Spangled Banner. And I played trumpet the first 3 years, and then I played baritone. Baritone it's not a tuba like the sousaphone wear around you, but it's a pretty big size horn, maybe about this big. It's huge, brass horn. It shines under the football stadium lights. And I went out, I marched out on the field. This is Friday night football in North Carolina in the South in a military town, and everybody goes. The band major goes up there and says, "Horns up!" Pop the horn up. The flicker of the metal, the brass shines into the crowd, and they go 1, 2, 3, 4. The band starts playing the Star Spangled Banner. Bop! I immediately put my horn down. I put it in a very public visual display of protest against, what I saw as the American system, the American imperialist system. I will not play to honor a country that is currently that currently treats immigrant brothers and sisters as second class citizens, discriminates against them, that I saw in high school. And I will not play for a song to a country that is mass murdering people in Iraq. I was 17, and I had a huge visceral reaction from the crowd. I think I went to go get some popcorn or something. People would come up to me like, "What is wrong with you? Why don't you play?" Physical threats of violence towards me. I was ostracized. People didn't even want to understand my opinion or where I was coming from. People are just put that anti-American label. That motherfucker's anti-American. He doesn't go along with what we believe. I was immediately othered in my community as a young man for what I believed to do the right thing by not showing any form of of patriotism, which I associate with jingoistic nationalism and the war and the oppression of immigrants. And, I really kept that position. I still keep those positions. I'm a strong, firm anti imperialist. And I link it. I link, monopoly capitalism, imperialism is the entire global political economic system. Like I said, we're a few oil banking cartels based in Wall Street and London, destroy the lives of the people and the imperialist countries, and super exploit and further create chaos and suffering and death and the oppressed nations to maintain the profits of a few. And, I did counter recruitment in high school. I did not think it was good for poor black and brown people to go kill other poor black and brown people for rich motherfuckers who are oppressing us here. I took it upon myself with little or no guidance. I had a basis I had a very, like maybe the system ain't so good for my dad. But I read Henry David Thoreau. Civil disobedience was a big part of what I was saying, what I started out in reading. Who fought who Henry David Thoreau was again. It was interesting. My two main positions were the war and immigrants' rights in high school. Those were the two things I really saw. And Henry David Thoreau really got me started on it because he was against the so-called Mexican American War, the U.S. invasion of Mexico. So I linked the national oppression of Mexican people here and the invasion and oppression and slaughter of people in Iraq and Vietnam. And I did counter recruitment, and then I eventually got to college and got into a more urban center, and I met up with people I believe to be the burning embers of the American communist movement, what has been left from either co-optation or brutal suppression. And I learned about Marxism, Leninism, and I learned about the Communist Party USA and the organizing styles. And I learned about, the basic ideas of organizing, the difference between a vanguard party, a mass organization. I really came into my own and took those somewhat liberal sentiments, which came from, I believe, a deep rooted love of humanity, and it put them in a scientific. I took my love of humanity. I still have this very strong agnostic faith in humanity and love for all human beings, the value of all life. And it put it into the scientific socialism, gave me a way to understand the material conditions in a way and truly know what's going on. So I can truly love my fellow human beings not by claiming that some religion or some group of people is the betterment, but to actually understand the reality and push, build power and push conditions further and further develop conditions to actually improve the lives of the people that I love, which is with the people around me in my country and the world over. And you'd be surprised with the current debate going on. In my training, there was a strong emphasis on the national question. The strong in the Black Belt South, African American people, some more radical folks say New African, whatever you call it, the material condition is the same. People in the South have never been given the full resources, have faced discrimination, and never truly been treated as if they're part of this country. And because of that, they're an oppressed nation and they have the right to either be a part of it or not be a part of it. So when I say all scientific socialism is patriotic, is specifically in the United States and worldwide, I'm not talking just about the United States. If people from oppressed nations, their scientific socialism is also patriotic, but to a different nation. So there's that. And so I'll get into it. I remember there was Iraq Veterans Against the War. There was a young man, I believe his name was Mathis. And I went to the DC rally, and he got up there and said, I refused. What I did in the US military was wrong, and I'm less of a man for doing it. And he burned the American flag on stage, and I was with some older comrades, and there was two different comrades who had two different positions. And one of the comrades was like, hey, we don't want to burn the American flag because we're going to ostracize and alienate, fellow workers that we're trying to appeal to. This is provocation. This is not a good organizing technique. And I think in many circumstances that is the case, especially right here. Was it? I mean, didn't have the scientific socialist understanding when I was in high school, and maybe it wasn't the best tactic to not refuse to play the Star Spangled Banner. I think what I did was right, and the knowledge I had was right. But maybe there was better ways I could have made connections with people and inroads with people, because I'll get into this later, by appealing to the positive aspects that they associate instead of being othered, coming out as being othered, for being anti-American. I could have said, well, what does America mean to you? And they should say peace and justice, prosperity. And that's what socialism is all about: peace, justice, prosperity, and democracy. That's what socialism can better do for the people. So, and then there was another person in the group, um, after that reacted to the burning of the flag by an Iraq war veteran when I went to DC. And this older comrade was like, hey, this might not be the best appeal for us and the communities we're reaching out to, but he is a veteran. And veterans have a little bit of more respect in the community. And maybe he can get away more with burning the flag in certain circles. So it was like, so it wasn't like the idea wasn't is a burning the American flag right or wrong? Wasn't the question. The question is tactics. The question was it a good thing for him to burn the flag? Did it achieve our overall goal of educating the masses to build power and go against imperialism? And I think in that specific case, it and things don't have to be all black and white. They don't have to be all positive or all bad. I think overall, the Iraq veterans that burned the American flag did a good thing. Did a good thing overall. And I think when I was in high school, and even though it wasn't the most effective tactic, me not playing the Star Spangled Banner, I think it planted some seeds, because later on I had people come up to me and say, "Hey, you were right about the war in Iraq. It was horrible." I had people come up to me and apologize to me. They could get over, people that knew me later on, who got to know me, actually came up to me and was like, I was horribly evil to you for your position, and I respect your right to take that. Even though we disagree with this patriotism thing, you were right about the Iraq war. And I think I did plant some seeds and I did some good in that instance. So another instance where the person in the older member in the party who agreed that it was the right tactic of the Iraq veterans to burn the flag. One time we were going out there and we were protesting the escalation in Afghanistan. This is under the Obama administration, and we had a bunch of people come out. Mostly the same, people from the RCP, people from different left organizations, urbanites, And there was this one brother that came out that seemed a little bit different. It just seemed more of a working class person that was interested came out. And they had a bandana of the American flag. And the person who was, who I said actually supported the burning of the American flag by the Iraq veterans, went up to this individual and he goes, "Hello, how you doing? You know, I'm with this organization, blah, blah, blah. I noticed your American flag bandana. What does that mean to you? What does that American flag bandana mean to you? And why is it relevant to us protesting the expansion of the war in Afghanistan?" And the young man, he was very respectfully talked to. Not a lot of other people were talking to him. He was being alienated. So it was a good thing for my comrade to go out and speak to this person. Maybe have him come back so he's not alienated by other people. And he goes, "The American flag means to me freedom, democracy. Um, it means the rule of the people, for, by, and of the people." And the older comrade who agreed that it was the right thing for the Iraq veteran to burn the American flag in that context in the anti war movement goes, "Yes, I'm with you, brother. I want to see an improved conditions. I want to see power to the people. I want to see a government for, of, and by the people. And if that's what that symbol means to you, you're all right here. And I'm glad you came out to protest the escalation in the war in Afghanistan." So, in one instance, where this is the nature of symbols, and this is what's really lacking in the depths of conversation, a lot of this online activism and virtue signaling is completely devoid from the self-critical the self-critical scientific analysis of tactics that is constant, that is happening. Um, and continue that was really a big part of the 1940s. It was like, what can we do, how can we do it, what can we say to actually get the people together to improve our material conditions, and what can we say to different communities to get them involved and bring them in. Like, that's completely missing. People simply want to be, "I'm on this side." It's interesting that, given my background as somebody who refused to say the Star Spangled Banner in a military town and the political repression I faced because of that, and then because I agree with the tactic of using the American flag, or using the positive elements of patriotic socialism to organize people and get them to further understand socialism. Because of that, I'm labeled as, now the opposite is happening. The same thing that happened to me in high school, where I was othered because I was anti patriotic, is now happening to me now because I refuse to give up a very critical, positive tactic, mass tactic, which is appealing to what people believe American patriotism to do, or the positive aspects of American patriot. Because I appeal to that, because I refuse to give up that tactic, now I'm being othered and ostracized in online left spaces by these people who have not nearly as much political understanding, not nearly as much political study, and simply want to virtue signal that they're on the right side of the issue, that they stand with the oppressed. And I've stood with the oppressed my entire life. And just because I use a symbol doesn't mean that I'm betraying those sentiments. It's entirely crazy. The level of discourse, I think, on both sides is ridiculous. And I'm going to say this here now. Um, there is a lot of horrible elements of national chauvinism within patriotic socialist circles. And I am honestly tired of it, that I'm being associated with these people simply because I approve of the tactic of patriotic socialism. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Some of the people I meet online do the opposite. They just want to virtue signal that they're patriotic socialists, and they're not actually looking for, you know, ways of reaching out to the community and create and building power to affect material conditions. So that's a little bit of what I'm getting into here. And so I'll keep getting into it. So after I dropped out of school, so when I was in, in underground Vanguard organization, we used both burning the flag. We supported oppressed nations' right. We cheered on oppressed nations burning the flag and completely rejecting U.S. Patriotism and their right to do so. We supported Iraq veterans burning the American flag against the empire and their circle. And we used American flags in the labor movement to appeal to positive sentiments of American patriotism. We studied figures like Paul Robeson, who was an American patriot from an oppressed nation. And Paul Robeson's view on it was, "My people were forced here." This is a quote from you got to watch this. Paul Robeson at the House of Un-American Activities, where he's being accused of being un-American and a communist and a traitor, and he tells them they're the fascists and he's the true patriot. And he says, "My people were took here, and we were forced as slaves to build up this country, and I'm a part of this country. For hundreds of years, my people have been a part of this country, been forced to build it up, and I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to take my rightful place in it." So people of oppressed nations, they have the right to completely have nothing to do with this country, or they have the right also to join the international working class and building up a new America that is free from national oppression, that truly respects the people of oppressed nations, and know that that reality doesn't exist currently. But in the minds of American communist patriots, that is what we are fighting for, and that is what we're loyal to. We're loyal to a new vision of America where all of the people, black, brown, white, immigrant, what have you, are part of a new system, a socialist system that is free from both labor exploitation and national exploitation. And Paul Robeson, who was being attacked for being anti-American, for being other, said, "I have been oppressed and I have built this country and I'm going to stay and be a part of it." And that's a beautiful thing. And I think those are both positive tactics that we can use. I mean, I don't see, there is no contradiction between between patriotic American communists and patriotic oppressed nationalists, even oppressed nationalists within the country, Chicano nationalists, whose land had been who I could get Chicano nationalism. 1/3 of the country was stolen from Mexico, half of Mexican territory, and brown people and people of Mexican descent are still treated like second-class citizens, and the land of their ancestors. It's absolutely disgusting. And I think you can be patriotic to Aslan, patriotism towards Aslan, and the American communist patriotism are completely compatible, along with patriotism for the Black Belt South and the oppressed communities in the urban areas of the Black nationalists. These things, like, we have the same enemy. And the enemy is the monopoly capitalists, and they exploit the general working class, and they super exploit the oppressed nations. And regardless if we can use completely different imagery and completely different rhetoric, our same goal is to organize masses of people to take the monopoly capitalist out of power and to build a new and better America. A new and better America that gives, that enables the national liberation of the oppressed nations. That forms a new America free from class and national oppression. And people don't get it. So I dropped out of school. I was less involved with activism. I had a lot of stuff going on in my life, and I drove trucks. for the last 8 years, I've been driving tractor trailers. And I stayed up with comrades online and on Facebook. And 2 years ago, I started to get back into mostly online activism. I work 60 hours. Well, I was over the road and it was almost impossible. I've recently transitioned to local work in North Carolina. I get home every day. I've been taking some of my time out. I've been building this community around Working Class Revolt. I do the weekly Working Class Revolt show with my comrade from my labor organizing comrade from Australia. We recently recruited a Scottish comrade, and I do this stuff. And this organization started with a study on William Z. Foster's The Three Internationals, and it's interesting. Two of my main political influences in this period have been the Chicano nationalists, Ernesto Ayala, leader of Partido Raza Unida, who was leading a media organization at the time called Telejaguar. That was one of my main online influences. And one of my main influences in this whole entire period, going back, has been Glenn Ford of the Black Agenda Report. I think people in all the oppressed nations are actually leading the anti-imperialist understanding and fight in this country. And I respect both the Black revolutionaries and Chicano revolution, the immigrant revolutionaries. They face worse, their communities face worse conditions, and they're going to be leading the struggle. And I support that. And that has been a huge portion of my ideological influence. And then another part of my ideological influence in this period has been the brother Caleb Maupin. And Caleb Maupin, which I'm now a member of the Center for Political Innovation, has been also, and he's also what helped me get into doing these YouTube shows as well. But really, what started was a mix of both. I watched this study from the great Chicano poet Matt Cedillo, and he was doing this study with an academic, brother Dr. Pedro, and you can look on my channel. They did over a year-long study on capital, and you can go back and look at that study on here. And I'm like, holy crap, this dude is able to host another person on here. I kind of want to do that. And this was like when this was so I took the format there, and I really loved what they were doing with scientific socialism. I really loved that appeal to the Chicano community, which I've been around and a part of, and I thought it was a wonderful, beautiful thing. If you go on my channel, you can see that study on Marx, the poet and the professor. Study Marx is the entire series is available on my YouTube channel. I highly respect both of them, and I support their work. And that was a huge inspiration for me to start my own channel as well. And along with Caleb Maupin, who really helped me get out of my dogmatism. I think early on in the earlier party, I had a more dogmatic Marxist-Leninist understanding. And I think that isn't exactly correct. The Soviet Union was wonderful and amazing, and they were at the forefront of the revolution. But socialism has continued after that. And I think what's happened in the West is revisionism. I'm still an anti-revisionist. I think the CPUSA has gone in a completely horrible direction. Even as early as Browder. I think Browder who was also a patriotic socialist. I think he went into a right-wing reactionary. I think he took it the wrong way. And you got figures like this Rev Left podcast that are very intellectually dishonest. And they'll take Browder and say, oh, there is right-wing, national chauvinist patriotism used in socialism. And they're right about that. But then they don't talk about Paul Robeson or William Z. Foster or the tactic in which I see it as. They simply take something that was negative aspect of what I'm promoting and then attaching it to all of it. There's very intellectually dishonest people out there. Like I had Raina Shea is another one of those people who are not are not intellectually honest on this issue. Maybe they believe what they're saying. Maybe they need to develop a little bit further. But if you look at, there's good voices like Caleb Moffin's a good voice. One of the best voices on the issue of patriotic socialism in the United States is who gets into it on a more academic level is Western Marx. Western Marx, the Chicano brother over there, and others, they do great work. And so my show started with a study of William Z. Foster's The Three Internationals with my comrade from Australia. And it was, yeah, that's a good point. Gavin Lockhart. Yeah, that's a good point. Early Browder was good, and then it went. And part of the reason why it went bad in the mid '40s was the beginning of McCarthyism really pushed them. They were in a weak position. Yeah, Midwestern Marx is probably one of the best people that get in the issue of American revolutionary patriotic socialism on an in-depth level. Um, so it's getting into this. So I started my show, and I would think two people at the beginning of my show. I thanked Matt Cedillo for applying Marxism to the oppressed community, working class Chicano community, and I thanked Caleb Maupin for promoting William Z. Foster, which is another American patriot and a very effective organizer. William Z. Foster is now being used by the Chris Smalls organizing campaign in Amazon. He was such an effective organizer. And his William Z. Foster's understanding of socialism, the three internationals, is amazing. So my entire show was inspired by Chicano nationalists and the American patriotic camp. And my working class revolt community chat groups have been full of both representatives of that organization from day one. Now, then, when Jason Henkel came up with this, I am an American patriot, he made a tweet. I am an American patriot. I am this and that. And that created a rift in those two communities. And a lot of it was not even like it was there as a contention, but it really didn't become a riff until it was brought out, and as if I think it was purposely the contention between the two groups was purposely used by the Twitter algorithms to get us to hate each other and go against each other. I really think that's what happened. And I had people leave the chat group. I had people no longer speaking to me because I decided that, going back, I had this training. I've always had a training that supporting oppressed nationalists and the tactic of patriotic American socialism were both positive, effective tactics. And I didn't see a contrast until this broke out, and then the dialogue just went into campism, and people like, I'm this, I'm that, we hate each other, these people represent American imperialism. If you use the American flag at all, you represent American imperialism. If you don't use it, then you're an ultra anarcho kitty who doesn't really understand socialism. And neither one of those labels truly applied to either one of those groups that I was involved with. And I was able to get a conversation with the brother from Anti-Conquista, Victor Coronado. And I had a good conversation with him. And you can go back and watch. It's one of my most viewed views on here. I really respect the work of Anti-Conquista. They completely disagree with the American Patriot tactic, which I'm completely in favor of them being from an oppressed nationalist diaspora. I'm perfectly okay with that. It's perfectly fine. And I respect their work. A little thing from Ewoks on Hinge. Dust Chamber, I think Jackson does need to work his leveling of patriot respect to oppressed nations. Hopefully, you and Cable can set you straight on that. I've actually been one of, like, I think I've had a positive influence on Caleb so far, given my background. I believe I have tried to push him towards a more materialist understanding of the national question and respect on that basis. I've been a firm supporter with that within the CPI community as well as the larger patriotic socialist community. I've been supporting understanding of the national question. I've had studies on the national question. I've had Chicano nationalists on my show to study the national question several times. You can go back and watch that. I studied with Telly Jaguar. I studied um, with another comrade, brother Joey Villarreal. You can go back and watch those videos. And this level of discord is just, oh. And I got up on these Twitter spaces. I'm just kind of disgusted by this whole debate bro culture. I really don't like it. I think some of this, I ain't going to mention names, but I'm from a working class background. And, elders are respected. And you got to stay in line because we live in working class communities, either white, black, what have you. Because the material conditions are so bad, there's certain social constraints that you have to agree to simply to make the family unit cohesive. This is our social network. You got to be respectful of the motherfuckers around you because those are the people you have to depend on when things get hard. And I think some of these debate bro tactics are completely contrary to working class culture. And I think honestly, some of these people need to have their grandma give them a good smack. To be honest with you, I'm sick and tired of it. I want to see good, professional, honest, open dialogue that I'm trying to put out there. And I believe I did that with the brother Victor Coronado, which you can go back and watch. I debated worse forces that I don't respect, like Jason Onrahu, who is a fucking anarcho kitty, who maybe put out some good anti-imperialist stuff, but now he's just a fucking egotistical child that offers nothing to the movement, and I'm completely done with. And his entire circle, fuck Jason Onruhe. Um, that's just what it is, and that's about it. So I'm looking at it now. I'm building my coalition, the Working Class Revolt Coalition. I'm continuing building working class revolt and doing these anti-imperialist America um, formats. And I will continue to support the tactic of patriotic American socialism. I will continue to support the work of oppressed nationalists who are fighting against the imperialist. And I want, I'm going to read a quote. So I'm getting near the end. I'm actually a little bit over. I promised my wife I'd make breakfast, watch my son. I really thank you. Big thanks to my wife who also is part of making these shows possible by putting in the labor to make sure my son is taken care of, so I have the time to do these shows. I got to look for that quote real quick. If people want to get in the comments, I might be able to address a few of them. I had the quote pulled up and I lost it. Let me see. It's not working on that device. Let me bring up this quote. I'll read this quote from the great Dimitrov. Dimitrov, Georgy Dimitrov, was one of the most effective anti-fascist and communist organizers in world history, second only to Stalin and Mao. And Georgy Dimitrov, in a Nazi kangaroo court, in a Nazi kangaroo court, was such a good orator and such a huge understander of had a huge understanding of what was going on. He was able to beat a kangaroo Nazi court against him. And then he went on to lead the Third International under Stalin that inspired the great unions all over the world. And right now, all these people would like to call themselves anti fascist, are sitting here attacking principled Marxist Leninists who are simply using a tactic. American patriotism that is just been a part of American communism from its inception. It was only the middle class deviation within the New Left that really took a shit on this tactic. And well, people say, well, what about the oppressed nationalists? Well, the oppressed nationalists didn't. They had every right to reject it. So I respect the oppressed nationalists of the so-called New Left. I do not respect the New Left that was a middle class deviation from the mass scientific socialist parties and mass organizing. When we actually had working class power, we had unions led by communists. Okay, here's the quote I'd like to. So Georgy Dimitrov, leader of the Third International, he wrote a book on combating fascism, and in his part where he was combating fascism, he talked about the ideological struggle against fascism. And here's a quote from what he said: "Under no circumstances must we underrate fascism's power of ideological infection. On the contrary, we, for our part, must develop an extensive ideological struggle based on clear, popular arguments and a correct, well thought out approach to particulars of the national psychology of the masses of the people. The fascists are rummaging through the entire history of every nation so as to be able to pose as the heirs and continuators of all that was exalted and heroic in the past. While all that was degrading or offensive to the national sentiments of the people, they make use of as weapons against the enemies of fascism. Hundreds of books are being published in Germany with only one aim: to falsify the history of the German people and give it a fascist complexion. The new baked National Socialist historians try to depict the history of Germany as if for the past 2,000 years, by virtue of some historical law, a certain level of development had run through it like a red thread, leading to the appearance on the historical scene of national savior, a messiah of the German people, a certain corporal of Austrian extraction. And these books, the greatest figures of the German people of the past, are represented as have been fascist, while the great peasants' movements are set down as the direct precursors of the fascist movement. Mussolini does this osmost make capital for himself of the heroic figure of Garibaldi, the French fascist, being to the fore of his heroine Joan of Arc. The American fascists appeal of American War of Independence, the traditions of Washington and Lincoln. The Bulgarian fascists make use of the national liberation movements of the 70s and its heroes beyond the people, Versailles, etc. Communists who suppose that all this has nothing to do with the cause of the working class, who do nothing to enlighten the masses on the past of their people in historically correct fashion, in a genuinely Marxist Leninist spirit, who do nothing to link up the present struggle with the people's revolutionary traditions and past, voluntarily hand over to the fascist falsifiers all that is valuable in the historical past of the nation, so the fascists may fool the masses. And that is Dimitrov, one of the greatest communist organizers, as well as one of the greatest anti-fascists. And what he's essentially saying in there is very similar to what Paul Robeson said, and is that I am the true American. While he was being assaulted by fascist elements that tried to claim the entire history of America, to say they're the real Americans, they're the real patriots. What Paul Robeson did was said, you are not the real patriots. You are not the real Americans. We are carrying on the true struggle, the advanced struggle, The struggle against the struggle against the British monarch, which inspired the world. It was a huge part of the Enlightenment's ideas. Ho Chi Minh looked up to the American Revolution. Lenin and his letter to the American worker. I did a study on that. You can go back and look at that study with great comrades. We're not giving the entire history over to the fascists. Just if you go to U.S. schools and you read what's been taught, they completely sanitize the beautiful resistance, history of resistance and struggle in this country. They water it, they whitewash it, and it's there. We're not giving the entire struggle over to the fascists. We truly want to combat the right wing and truly combat the fascists. We have to say that there has been, and I'm a leftist. I hate people rejecting the term leftist because leftist simply means on the right side of history. It means supporting the correct side of history moving forward. And the American so-called founding fathers, and in their day, yes, they were slave owners. Yes, they were committing genocide. But in that day, when the struggle was between the colonists and a literal monarch, colonial monarch, they were leftists. The American revolutions were leftists, and they fought against that, and they inspired the world, and that's something beautiful to look back on. And I can go through and people, there's another thing that people like to say. People like to say, well, all those people that you look up to, they fought against America. Well, that depends on what your definition of America is. As a political system, as an oppressive, disgusting political, yes, they fought against America. But America as the people, as the culture, those people were Americans. They were from America. They were brought about by the particular conditions that is America and fought against the political system that's claiming to be America. So we can say, as patriotic American socialists, that we are the true inheritors of the legacy of John Brown, of the labor movement, of the mass labor movement, of May Day, which gave inspiration to the world, and the labor movement, where they're fighting for the 8-hour day, which I still don't have because I still work like 12 hours a week. Happy May Day, comrades, brothers and sisters. Solidarity to all oppressed nations, liberation to the Black Belt South and the oppressed communities and the diaspora, liberation to Chicano, to Aslan, free Aslan, national liberation, solidarity for all that fight against the injustice, all that fight against imperialism, use any tactics and any means necessary to build power, to overthrow imperialism and make a new America. A new America free from class and national oppression. Thank you, brothers and sisters. All power to the people.